Is there really? I think that's it, isn't it? That's 11.
Elizabeth, is Elizabeth joining us?
Sorry.
Elizabeth from Canada? No, the
Oh,
other
Elizabeth Hutchinson.
Yes.
No. I decided not to enlarge the class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't
So,
realize I was muted before. Hi, everyone. I'm having a camera issue, but I am here.
hi, dear Eva.
Morning.
I thought you were wearing black with a big name tag and you were very close to the camera.
Hopefully I can figure it out, but if not, I'm listening very closely.
Okay.
I found the videos that you shared with us to be really fascinating. It was
really?
to see how much it could come to life, because as you were saying in the beginning, you wiped it on and I'm thinking, oh no. But as you started to wipe it off, the difference is really incredible. So thank you for sharing.
It's a pleasure. I mean, glazes traditionally look disastrous when you put them on.
Yeah.
You think, oh my God. But once you get used to it and you realize that you can completely transform paintings with them and get way more subtle and just all manner of things. I mean, there's just no end. The number of things you can do with that tool is, it's limitless. Did I tell you about the cutlasses in Grenada? They, in the Caribbean, they carry machetes, which they call cutlasses, which surely must be the original version of the pirate's cutlass, Actually, I have two of them around here somewhere. Well, anyway, they are basically machetes, and everyone has a machete in the islands, and a lot of people carry it, because they're working all the time. And they use the cutlass for everything, literally everything. They use it as a hammer. They chop wood rather than sawing it. I mean, everything, whatever you want to do, the cutlass does it. Well, that's what glazing is like, really. Whatever you want to do, it can accomplish just about everything. So, yeah. Well, you guys, it's time, isn't it? It is time. So I'm going to get rid of the keyboard and put it there. I have all kinds of interesting things for you. Today, I'm going to be stacking up a lot of things, one on top of the other. I'm going to stack up concepts, each of which is relatively simple, but I'm going to keep going and keep going. It's necessary because the reason for glazing is so complex and interesting that you need all the concepts together at one time. So what I'm going to say is I'd really like to kind of open it to questions more or less as I go along. And if you could do this, if you've got a question or if there's anything you don't understand, put your hand over the lens. So, but do it when I'm looking at the camera, when I'm looking at the screen. Do it, and I'll remember who has a question, and then the first opportunity, I'll come back to you and ask you what you needed to clarify, because the thing about it is you've got to kind of thoroughly comprehend every one of the concepts, or otherwise they will not build together at the end. You see what I mean? It's really kind of important that you all really get it. And please be courageous and really ask the stupid question. If you consider it to be stupid, that is usually the one to ask, because the more stupid it is, the less people are inclined to ask it. because they don't want to look stupid. So you wind up with an entire class, no one understanding a point, because no one dared to ask the question. So I really want to guard against that. By all means, take notes, but you might want to review it all in the recorded video so that you come along with me. Because I used to find in those classes in Texas that sometimes I'd make a point, and so their head would go down, they'd be taking notes on that point, and it would come out later in the workshop that they didn't understand any of the stuff that followed that point because they were so busy writing it all down, they missed what was coming. So, I don't want you to miss anything, so you grasp it all. Okay, right. Yeah, there we are. Okay. A few really simple points. Glazing is half of painting. One half is solid paint, and the other half is translucent paint. One lays down a ground color that the other one then adjusts, and that's how it works. Otherwise, it's like having a car that only goes at 60 miles an hour and nothing in between, nothing faster. It's absolute. It allows you all the minute gradations in between, and you sort of saw that in the glazing videos, how it can really give you all the gradations. So half of painting is solid paint, impasto paint, scumbling. You're familiar with that word, scumbling. It's like grazing, grazed paint. All the different ways of applying solid paint. And the other is transparent and translucent, and all the gradations between solid paint and completely clear glaze medium. It's all the gradients in between those two things. So yeah, so the two halves of painting. As an example, art history has had some quite clever people in it, like Vermeer, for example, who found glazing indispensable. And he was fairly clever, really, wasn't he? Quite nice paintings, know what I mean? They're sort of nice, aren't they? So, okay. The glazing and the solid painting, because of the nature of Damar glaze medium, none of the others really can be trusted. Because of the nature of it, I'm going back for a second. Anyone that wants the recipe to Damar glaze medium, please ask and I'll tell you it. But basically, you can do this. You can stack. You can put, there's a canvas. You can put solid paint on the canvas, followed by a glaze, followed by solid paint, followed by a glaze. Can you see? That's awfully small, isn't it? But you get the idea. Followed by solid paint on some of it and a glaze on some of it, followed by another glaze, followed by another glaze, and another glaze, and then some more solid paint. And that is what makes a painting. And the whole stack dries together and lasts for 500 years, basically. And it doesn't matter what order, you can put them in any order, back and forth and back and forth. Some paintings requiring very little glazing, others requiring tons and tons of glazing. So yeah, so that's how you can use them. Basically, absolutely anyhow you want. So that's that. Glazing is very straightforward, extremely. There's nothing easier than putting on a glaze. It's like hitting a piano key. There's nothing easier. I mean, anyone can hit a piano key. But the decision-making process on glazing is complex and very interesting. That is like playing Debussy. That is the thing that is interesting, you know. But basically glazing, anyone can glaze. A child, a small child can glaze. So I only ever call it oil glazing because glazing in acrylic is basically impossible. Of course, they sell glaze medium, acrylic glaze medium, but it's impossible to use. It's a waste of money. And the reason it's impossible to use is glazing is all about judgment. It's 100% judgment, because you put a glaze on and you're immediately, while it's beginning to dry, you're immediately saying, oh, hang on, right, I need to pull it off here. You pull it off with a rag, or you thin it a little bit and then spread it back out with a brush, and you say, no, maybe not here, or I'll have it there, and I want to thicken the layer here, and so forth. Acrylic glaze medium is like watered down milk. So when you put it on, you can't see the color you're putting on the painting because it's all milky until it dries. So you are it's like glazing with a blindfold on. It's sort of ridiculous, really. It's a waste of time. So, excuse me. So glazing is a skill. It is a tool to learn as opposed to decision making, which is judgment. It's a different thing. So this tool, here is how to blend edges on it. There are so few things I really will bother to tell you because you'll discover them so easily anyway. But there are two things that are worth knowing to just kind of get you ahead of the game. And it's really simple. It's like this. I'll draw big, by the way. Say you are glazing this area and you want to soften the edges so that there's not a hard edge. It's really simple. There is the glaze that is colored. You just put a little bit of clear glaze medium around here, and you use a fan brush or something like that, and you soften here. You just soften that, and then you have a nice even soft gradient out of one glaze and into clearness, So yeah, it's easy. Another thing I find, by the way, because you're often wanting fairly fine hair brushes to move glazes around and also to make them very even, because of that, I find that Damon glaze medium can leave a sticky residue in fine brushes. Well, any brushes, basically. So I keep a little jar of purified turpentine with the lid on because it's fairly stinky. But I like the smell, actually. I think I'm an addict to purified glaze medium. So I keep a little jar of that so that when I have to clean glazing brushes, I use my little jar of purified turpentine, because glaze medium is partially made of purified turpentine, so it completely dissolves it. Your brushes are back just perfect. So yeah, so that's that. let us go to decision making. This is the whole of the rest of the class, is actually decision making. And it's funny, you know, we spent 2 minutes on technique, and we're going to spend all the rest of the time on decision making, because that is the most important thing. Decision making, and also refining your eye. The last section of the class is going to be about refining your ability to understand atmosphere and personality in paintings. Refining your eye, basically. Yeah. First of all, as you're learning this, because I know some people are intimidated by glazing, because they say, well, you know, I've never glazed, and I mean, I'm doing okay, and so forth. They're a little intimidated. Does everyone know the 4 stages of learning? Learning is always, new material is always intimidating, and they're very famous, the 4 stages. And it's best to talk about tying shoelaces in them, because we've all seen children, and we've all been children, learning to tie shoelaces. So the 4 stages are, the first one is unconscious incompetence. Basically, you don't know that you don't know. You had no idea there was such a thing as shoelaces. And so, do you know, by the way, that once I happened to have a chimpanzee in my arms in a zoo in Texas owned by a friend. I did an art event there. This is very funny, actually. So I did an art event there. And I said, where would you like me to hang the paintings? And she said, oh, just put them in here. I'll take down these things. So she took down a Renoir, and she said, could you put this vase somewhere? And she stuck a vase in my hand, and I looked at it, and it was signed by Picasso. Actually, I said, this isn't one of his ceramic pieces. She said, well, yeah. Completely bizarre. Anyway, she had a chimpanzee around the house with a little diaper on. And so he was in my arms at the time, and I was getting ready to talk, and I tied my shoelaces, and he was absolutely fascinated with the shoelace thing. So I said to him, how about if I'll show you how to tie shoelaces? Because he was then messing around with my shoelaces. He was sort of fascinated by them. So I crouched down on the floor, and I started, I said, here's what you have to do. You have to do this with the lace, and first of all, pull that tight. Then you have to, and I'd got about half the way through, and he sort of made that chimpanzee grin, and he sort of went like this, and he went like this, like, I'm not following you. Oh dear, chimpanzees. On that day, a baboon took my glasses off. You never want that to happen. So, okay, no, a gorilla. It was a gorilla, actually. So, and screwed them up into a ball. So, stages of learning, yeah. So the first stage is unconscious incompetence. You don't even know that you don't know. The second stage is conscious incompetence. Like now you've discovered that there are shoelaces and you don't know how to tie them. So anyone that's not done glazing, because I've told you that there's such a thing, you are now at the stage of conscious incompetence. You know that you don't know. You will next go on to conscious competence. That is when you know, but you have to think about it. It takes concentration. Is this right? I don't know. Maybe, yeah, that's maybe, oh, I'm not sure. Let's ask Edward, kind of, that sort of thing, you know? And the final stage is unconscious competence. Finally, you can do it with your eyes closed, pretty much. In other words, you look at a situation, you say, oh yeah, that's obvious. And you mix a glaze and you put it on, you don't even think about it. So yeah, 4 stages of learning. don't worry about when you're at one of the stages, because every human being, and probably a lot of animals, like that chimpanzee, go through the 4 stages. It's unavoidable. You have to go through these stages. And the thing is, people that go far are people that are not afraid to ask the stupid question and are happy with all 4 stages. They're the only people that ever really learn anything, because everything's the same, isn't it? It's very simple. You start out not knowing even what it is, and you end up knowing it so well, you can do it with your eyes closed. So yeah, so there we are. Decision making, whether it is conscious or intuitive, is basically orchestration. And that is the word. It's such an important word. It's so huge. I should have written it further up. Okay. So orchestration. Orchestration is what makes a painting. Like now, you know, all the paintings you've been making, orchestration is what makes those paintings. Good orchestration is what makes a good painting. Great orchestration is what makes a great painting. And that, you might say, is what divides people. It's your ability to orchestrate, isn't it really? Your ability to orchestrate is what divides the sheep from the goats. Yeah. Orchestration, you could say, is human creative intention and vision. Human creative intention and vision. The ability to see it and to deliberately intend it, you know, is probably exactly the function that occurs over and over and over in orchestration. So yeah. You'll love my notes. I'm going to send you all my notes, of course. My notes are almost verbatim. The more complex a subject is, the more verbatim my notes are. So you'll remember the workshop because my notes are verbatim. By the way, look at my cup. Don't you think that's appropriate? Okay. He's such a princess. Such a bitch. So, orchestration is the reorganization of the elements of a painting. The reorganization of the elements of a painting is what orchestration is. And the elements are the following, and they'll all be in the notes. They are composition, perspective, space, proportion, scale, tonal construction, architecture, temperature, cast, chords, which in turn bring atmosphere, personality, and tenor. What is the tenor of this painting, you know? And concept, which is idea and style, and mark and surface. I think that more or less covers the elements of a painting. We're only going to concentrate on a couple. The most salient ones are the ones we're going to concentrate on. The way to understand these elements is like this. And you know, they'll all be in the notes, but basically they are there. They're all there. Yeah. So the way to understand these elements and how they relate to each other, and there are 8 or 12 of them. If you count the titles and the subtitles, it's 12. If you count the main headings, it's 8, probably more, is to consider them to be a layer cake. Consider them to be a cake. That might not be the right number, but it doesn't matter. You get the idea. Let's put a cherry on. Okay. So consider all those elements to be a cake. And every square inch, excuse me, every square inch of the painting is basically a slice of the cake. So every square inch of the painting is a slice that includes all the elements. We're going to kind of get magical now. Every square inch carries composition, perspective, space, proportion, scale, tonal construction, architecture, temperature, cast, chords, atmosphere, personality, tenor, concept, style and idea, and mark and surface. Every square inch contains all of them. Because every square inch obeys the concept. It has a different role, but it obeys the concept. Let's take it further. Every brushstroke in the painting contains the whole cake and all the elements. Every brushstroke extends and serves the concept. So in other words, the artist is conscious of all the elements simultaneously, and every bit of paint that you mix or that you adjust with a glaze or change with a glaze is serving all of them simultaneously. So you're painting the light on a cup in a figurative painting, we'll say like one of mine. Now that color of the light in the white cup, not the highlight, but the light, is affected by compensation for going from reality to a canvas. A canvas is not lit directly like reality in the wide world. A painting can be controlled tonally, so it isn't in fact white. The whole painting may have a cast that changes it again from now what it is, probably light grey or something. It changes it again because of the cast of the painting. the angle, now you're getting into perspective and architecture, the angle of that light will affect whether that light grey is warm or cool. Its placement in the cup will affect whether it is shaded or in the light, but we already said that it's in the light. And then it's adjusted in relation to everything else. And then it's adjusted in relation to what reflects on it. So all those factors come to bear on the one colour that I will mix to go in the light area of that cup. But my brush, as I lift it up out of the paint and it moves towards the painting, is carrying all those intentions in one brush full of paint. All the intentions are carried. Are they not? They really are, aren't they? Every brush full of paint carries all the intentions simultaneously. Yeah. It's really an interesting idea, isn't it? And to a great extent, you've already been doing that. You've already been doing that. We're just taking it, further and opening it up, looking at the theory inside it. Or it's not even a theory, it's just the truth of it. So yeah. So it contains the very accurate genetics of the painting, which is why criminals can't dare to leave a skin cell or a hair at the scene of a crime, because it carries the genetics of their entire body, just like every brushstroke of a painting. So it contains an angled plane, it supports given space, goes to build a form of a given proportion, and a deliberate tonal value shown accurately by its warmth or coolness, its color architecture. It carries a cast or temperature for the painting, is accurate to a color chord, because although the cup was white, the chord may say differently. The chord may require that it be a different color, in fact. It supports the chosen style and content, surface, and the painting's mark and surface philosophy. You all have, a mark and surface philosophy in the way you paint. So yeah, it's all there. It's all there at the same time. The fact that it is so vast is the reason that glazing is indispensable, isn't it? That is the reason that you can't possibly do without glazing, because no one is bright enough. Including Vermeer is standing with us here. No one's bright enough to get this right. Francis Bacon used glazes. No one can see that far in advance. Comprehending those elements. By the way, remember to call me if something isn't clear, okay? Call me if anything is not clear. And it's best not to feel overwhelmed if you can possibly avoid it, but in a way to feel, instead of overwhelmed, to feel astonished by what you've been doing, actually, all along. Nothing's changed. This is what you've been doing, in fact. Comprehending those elements requires knowing about the size of the library of color visible to human beings. Now imagine imagine a log or a cylinder the size of a city block. So imagine a cylinder like this. Here are people. Imagine an absolutely enormous log. This is just color and tonal value. In the center of it, in the center of the log, if you were to cut it down the middle, in the center, imagine this. I'm making sure you can see everything. Okay. Imagine in the center the color wheel. Red, yellow, blue, orange, violet, and basically what you have there is you have minute gradients between red through scarlet to orange, you know, all those thousands of gradients between the one and the other. And then all the thousands of gradients through crimson between red and violet, getting ever more cool as it goes to violet, and so forth, all the way around. So now you've got about 1 million, well, it's infinite actually, isn't it? You've got infinite colors in the color wheel around the outside. Okay. Now imagine perfect mid-gray in the center. That is perfect mid-gray in the center. And now imagine the infinite gradients between bright red, middle red, and perfect mid-gray. Now imagine something, a color that is somewhere between yellow, but it's slightly towards green, and it's perfectly bright on the outside, and all the gradients between it and perfect mid-gray in the center. Well, in the middle of the log, that is what you've got. You've got all the colors going to gray in the center. And then this end, if you make it transparent again, this end is white. This end is snow white, or as white as paint will go. And this end, of course, is black. So we can do better. Hold on. Oh, look. Very clever. So there it is, yeah. Now in that log, the size of a city block, are infinite colors and tonal values, infinite, aren't they? Of course, for our purposes, we must call the white only as white as paint can get, and the black only as black as paint can get. But basically, you're dealing with infinite colors. Really handy, actually. Incredibly handy to have infinite colors, isn't it? So those are all the colors that are possible in paint. But actually, they have an uncertain relationship with the real world because colors are changed by context. And tonal values are also changed by context. And that is what you are allowing for in your paintings. You are adjusting them according to the colours that they're sitting next to. Adjusting them according to the colours you see them against, because that changes them. I'll give you an example. Did you all have time to have a glance at Nudité, the painting that I've just been working on? Did you have a chance to look at that? I put it on the group chat. It's worth having a look. Do you just remember, and it's worth just kind of remembering, but do you remember the white table behind the figure? And it's not finished, so it's badly lit. The top is actually brighter than the bottom, brighter than it should be actually, than the bottom. But you remember the white table, yeah? When you look into the world of that painting, does it look fairly white to you? I don't actually. I think I took it off here. Oh, here it is. Whoa. There it is. Oh, it looks terrible. It looks just impossible on Zoom, It can't be seen on Zoom. So anyway, you get the idea. Well, here is the light color of the table. This is on white paper that is actually dirty, so it's not a very good judge. But here is the color. Here is the color of the table. The tabletop, the tablecloth, is that color. And the highlights in the cup that make it look like china, it's sparkling. Here are the highlights. Here are the highlights. And all of my paintings that you've ever seen, those are the tonal values. Those are the tonal values of the light, all the glass and the china, the crockery, all that stuff. The highlights and the highlights in the eyes, all that. That is the color. Beethoven that I just finished. That's Beethoven. The highlights in the glass and everything. Paper and cloth doesn't get that bright, so that's what they are. Yeah. So when I talk about compensation for the fact that it's a painting, I really mean compensation. Isn't that amazing? It's kind of ridiculous, really, because paintings are not reality. They are another compensated world because they're made of paint. They're not made of all the things that the rest of the world is made from. So it's all compensated for. Gauguin paintings are not bright at all. Go and have a look at one in a museum, but don't look in books because books make the color bright again. In other words, books make them look the way people think of them, the way they believe them to look, but it's not true. So we are filled with beliefs, Yeah, Arlene, actually, this is a good moment. Yeah.
Good. And this is actually a question for Lisa, or perhaps Ernest, or anyone, or Eva. Eva, I know. Anyone who has actually seen one of your paintings in person. Are you aware of that kind of color difference from what I see on screen when you're actually looking at these paintings in person?
Yes,
Actually,
absolutely.
Ernest saw one, yeah. Lisa has seen loads.
Yeah, it definitely looks different in person than on screen.
Okay. Are they dark?
You
Like
don't,
as in-
when you see them, I mean, you don't see them as that dark, but it's really incredible to see how dark the paint he uses. But it doesn't, when it's all put together on the painting itself, it doesn't look
Right.
that dark.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate
then
that.
I'll answer that also. No, they do not feel dark because they're immersive worlds. I look at the painting and I'm in there,
Yeah.
and there's a tablecloth and there's figures and there's a floor, and whatever the tonal range is, whether it's shallow or whether it's a very deep dynamic tonal range, and we discussed that last time, it just is what it is. It's a cohesive world.
Right.
And looking at it as an object in front of you, it's really immersive. And I did not really spend any time thinking about the relative tonal value of a particular area of paint. So if you have that gray that Edward just showed, and you put it next to a white paint, then it looks darker. But if you put it next to a very dark paint, it looks lighter. It's all relative, and that's the engineering of the painting. When you're in a painting, you're just not thinking about the construction of it, at least if it's successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate your experience being shared with us, because my mind right now is sitting here going, no way, no way. So thank you. Thank you.
I mean, you'd think that the paintings would look awful, wouldn't you? Like, turn the light on, I mean, that they would look like they were nighttime paintings. But, just as maybe a better example, I'll hold them next to me.
Yeah.
So that you can compare. I mean, those are the highlights. The ones closest to me are actually the highlights in glasses. It's really bizarre, but yeah, strange. So thank you guys for that input on the paintings. Yeah, you really wouldn't know. Like, no one has ever said in any exhibition or at any event, "Ooh, your paintings are so dark." They've never said that, except emotionally. They say, "Yeah, I couldn't live with this, mate. I'll be sad all the time." So yeah. Here are a couple of other interesting questions. Have you ever had the honor to sit at sunset outside with white china crockery on the table? Like, I've sat very often in the Caribbean, because I lived there for so long, with white china on a table and drinking tea with friends, and there was white crockery on the table. And have any of you had that experience of sitting outside at sunset or around sunset? Yeah? Did you at the time believe that your cups had become orange? Or did you continue to think of them as white? So you were seeing orange or peach or salmon. You were seeing that, but believed them to be white. It's interesting. Have you ever seen a redhead, someone with red hair, standing in the shade of a tree on a snowy day? Have you noticed that their hair is violet? Because look down at their feet, because the shade of the tree in the snow is bright blue. Isn't it? It's bright blue. So the ambient light, they're standing in the shade, the ambient light's bright blue, And if their hair is red, it is only lit by the ambient light. So it has to be violet, doesn't it? You light anything that's red with a blue light and you see violet, but you don't believe it to be violet. Isn't this interesting? You really have to, learning to draw, excuse me, the reason it's so incredibly important to learn to draw, to really, really learn to draw, is that what it is the overturning of your assumptions and beliefs is what it is. That's the whole function of drawing. It's not the ability to depict things particularly. What it is the ability to see. All drawing does, the main thing it does, is it teaches you to see. Instead of drawing what you believe, you actually learn to see things as they are. I know that sounds really strange, but and any one of you, anyone with the ability to catch a ball and write their name, as the book says, can learn to draw like a photograph. Anyone can. It's not a talent. Drawing is a skill. Building the concept of a drawing is another matter. That is talent, that is foresight and vision, but drawing itself, anyone is capable of drawing, anyone, unless they have a problem with their eyes. Yeah. So we have a belief system attached to color that accommodates the color of light. That means that we see one color and believe it to be another color. Children and naive painters are known to paint their beliefs instead of painting reality. Children and naive painters are famous for painting what they believe instead of what they see. And talk about believe. If you tell them it's different, they literally will not believe you. They'll think you are lying. Because children paint the grass as a green line on the bottom of the painting because it's at the bottom. Because it's below them, below their eyes. They paint the sky very often as being a line at the top because it's so far up. They have a problem with tables. Tables present an enormous problem for children. Whoa, ow, an explosion. Yeah, they have an enormous problem with tables because they know the table is square. They know, you see, they know it's square because they've sat up at the table and they know it's the same size on all sides and it's square. So they know that the legs come down probably to the floor. Well, they know they come down to the floor. Wherever people are standing, you see, if there's someone standing there, they stand like this. The trouble they have is with the other two legs. And you can see children saying, well, because they know they come to the floor, but they can't work out where they go because they're drawing their beliefs. All four legs come to the floor and the table is square and it cannot be resolved. There's no easy way to resolve that. And of course, in the corner, the sun is shining. And there is the blue of the sky. Yeah. Painting beliefs. I know it looks like I'm wandering, but I'm really not. Because a lot of the function of glazing is something about a creative intention that is free of beliefs. Unless you're a naive painter and you... did you have a question actually, Sharon? I like the, oh, okay. I saw a little thumbs up. I thought that's an inventive way. That's possible to do, actually. It's interesting. You know, yeah, so children and naive painters, yes. So what we have now in the orchestration is we have reality versus belief. It's not hard to overcome, actually. It isn't hard to overcome. But there are some people that are very stubborn. They're very stubborn about their beliefs. And I worked with one woman in Texas that could not get it. And we worked for days on this. And I was trying to get her, sorry, I'm just moving this out of the way, this music stand. I tried to get her to draw the truth of what she saw. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'll come back in just a second. And she just could not accept. She couldn't resolve it. And I gave her several exercises. And she did them, and the class ended, and she kept going for hours. We literally went out and had dinner and left it all set up so that she could carry on. And she did it. She broke through. She broke through and she could draw what she sees. So some people are stubborn, but it's not hard to learn. But you've got to break through the beliefs. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I was thinking all the time that this has components that are philosophical and psychological. And
Yeah.
that adds like a different layer of maybe when you were talking about this woman, maybe of like that you had to cross. It's not just like the seeing, but it's also when you say it's reality and belief, it's like totally like not just your eyes. Obviously, never is your eyes only painting that.
No, that's right. No, because your eyes go via your assumptions and beliefs, don't they? Nothing that comes out of your hand in terms of mixing paint can escape going through the facility of beliefs and assumptions on its way. So, yeah. But ultimately, you know, seeing is actually much simpler than beliefs and assumptions. It's very childlike, ultimately. Simply seeing the truth of things is very, very simple.
If you allow it to be.
Yes. Yeah, we can dig into this further, guys, because any of you that are painting reality, and I think you all are, Henrietta is moving towards a combination of abstraction and reality, but you know, still we're all somewhat within the gamut of reality, versions of reality. Reality is filled with assumptions and beliefs. So yeah, so there's that. So we can come back to it. Okay, color architecture comes next. Oh, there is one other little filter that the log of all the possible colors goes through, and that is the fact that when you come out of that log of infinite colors, and you go through paint, it goes through the randomness of pigments then, and pigments are random. Color theory stops there because in theory, red and green make gray because it sits perfectly in the center, but in paint, they never make gray. In theory, red and blue, and in light, in fact, red and blue make violet, but not in paint. They usually make gray, actually. When you mix red and blue, they become gray. Pigments, every pigment is unique because it's made of a chemical. So it's a whole separate thing from color theory. And of course, you all know very well, actually, this is not new information to any of you. You all get a grasp of, oh, I know what I have to do to compensate for this and compensate for that. And you need a lot of this color, but be careful of this color because it's very, very bright and it overwhelms the mix. You know all that, don't you? You've all had experience of colors that overwhelm the mix and so forth. So you know all about that. Yeah. But that's just a filter that color theory goes through. Yeah. So let's talk about color architecture. That comes next. And all this is a part of glazing because glazing is your only method of compensating and adjusting for these complexities. Yeah. It's interesting. Because you kind of have to know the complexities of the real world, even though paintings are essentially abstract. A painting of a human being is not a human being, but a flat abstraction of a human being on canvas and made with paint. That's not a human being. It's a kind of abstraction. It's an idea of a human being. And the requirements of a painting are as complex and convoluted as reality is. So anyway, I hope this is making some sense. So let us just talk about color architecture. It's a relatively simple one. So we understand form. In other words, the human being that was trying to protect himself from the leopard or the lion or the dog understands, his eyes understand the form of the dog moving through space, or a human being coming after them with a spear and moving through space. They understand them by two different methods. One is that they have binocular vision. And you know how that works, don't you? Binocular vision. It's incredibly accurate. It's because the eyes toe in. When you're looking at something very close, like your finger, your eyes almost cross. When they're standing in the distance, your eyes are almost parallel. Your pupils are almost parallel, running in parallel. So one method is that when a baby first looks at something, like the mother's finger coming towards the baby, you notice newborn babies often miss. They often miss because learning distance and connecting it with what the muscles of the eyes are doing is learned by experience. So when the baby sees the finger at a certain distance and finally grabs onto it, what they've just done is put a benchmark in their brain. They now know how far away a finger is when it looks like that and when it feels like that in their eyes. They learn the meaning of distance by connecting those two things. That is one way that we learn how far away things are. But the way that we learn what shape they are is by color architecture. And here is how color architecture works. And I've covered this before, but it's really good to cover it again because it's a principle that is really, really handy in painting, handy to know. Okay. We have, I really shouldn't have put these so low down on the board, really. You know what they are. I'll do this. Our planet happens to have a white sun. The sun is perfectly white. It contains the entire spectrum. And when people float outside of our atmosphere, the sunlight on them is snow white. So you notice pictures from space, they look rather washed out, that people look very pale, very white. I mean, the sun is very bright, of course, but also you're seeing them in white light, which is rather unusual. And as the white light comes to Earth's atmosphere, actually the atmosphere is incredibly thin because it's 5 miles at the absolute most. You can't live at 5 miles up. So given that the planet is 24,000 miles around, 12,000 to go halfway, 5 miles is like really the atmosphere is thinner than that line around the world. Isn't that amazing? You think of the atmosphere as being going, a long way out, but it really doesn't. When it comes through the atmosphere, the particles of the atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen, and water, happen to disperse the blue rays. For some reason, those particles, those molecules, bounce blue rays and nothing else. Hence, that's why we have a blue sky. We have a blue sky because of the stuff in the atmosphere that bounces it around. So it takes all the blue out of the sun, providing us with a very pale orange sun. So the actual sun is white, but what we see in the sky is in fact orange. Very, very pale orange, and we have a blue sky. So when we see a person standing in the sun, one half of their face is yellow, and the other half of their face, the shadow, picks up the bounced light from the ambient light from the sky and is glazed with blue. And orange, actually, pale orange on the lit side and blue on the other. And you know that orange is opposite blue on the spectrum. So right there, you have a complement. And complement is spelt with an E, of course. It is complement. It's spelt with an E. It's not a compliment like, oh, you're looking very nice today. It's complete, complement. It completes. So orange and blue are complements. Orange is on one side, blue is on the other, and that tells you the shape of forms. That is how you understand forms, because of those complements. Kind of interesting, really, isn't it? It's your way of literally comprehending what shape something is, whether they have a large nose or a small nose or whatever they've got. In London, the light is flatter, but there's a slight orange-yellow glow from backlit clouds. So even though it is grayer, there is still a blue ambience on one side of the sky and a yellow yellow-orange glow on the other side, very, very slight. So European paintings are much more subtle than paintings done in the Mediterranean and a lot of America, except in very South America and the middle of America, because of the weather. It changes perceptions. You know, the Impressionists were always talking about the light, weren't they? The light. They go to Auvers for the light. Yeah. It's interesting that if you look at 1920s paintings, between 1890 and 1950, colorism was at its absolute height. They were very, very perceptive people. And the portraits done at that time, if they were done in Europe or somewhere cloudy, the faces were cool in color. And because the cracks were seen against the blue cast of the faces, the cracks were often bright red. But you can't tell until you go up to the painting that they're either brick red or bright red. They used bright red cracks. The nostrils, the edges of the mouth, you know, around the eyes. It's worth having a close look at 1930s, 1940s portraits. They use bright red in the cracks because it's the complement. It's a way of understanding a face with a blue cast. Yeah. So form is conveyed in art using temperature shifts. Warm lights and cool shadows, or warm shadows and cool lights. And it doesn't matter what kind of color light anyone is lit with, but by contrast, the shadowed side will look as if it's the opposite because of the relationship between the two colors. If you put a bright blue circle in a painting, everything around it is made to look orange, a little bit orange around the blue. It's just those relationships. So when a face is lit with blue ambient light, the cracks look very warm, very hot, and the shadows look warm by contrast. Yeah, it's all just by contrast. Yeah. Now that is particularly pronounced in paintings because paintings have an additional problem. They're flat. So that contradiction of the two colors, that complement, is amped up and increased in paintings because paintings have to overcome their problem of flatness. Yeah, they have to overcome it. So they amp it up and then it looks more like reality. Yeah. When you look at paintings that have those contrasts amped up, you actually don't necessarily see the temperature shifts because you believe in the form and you believe that the form is three-dimensional. But you don't notice the shifts because what it's done is trigger your belief that you have in the real world, your belief in those complementary colors creating form. You believe it, you see. So that way, painters struggle to overcome their beliefs, but they use the beliefs of their viewers in order to make their paintings look three-dimensional. Kind of sneaky, really, isn't it? You know, one of the sneaky truths of artists. There are lots of sneaky truths. So, yeah. How are you doing? What I've been doing is I've been telling you all the parameters that require you to use glazing as your only way of making fine adjustments. If you're feeling like the second stage of learning, like conscious incompetence, if you're feeling a little bit consciously incompetent, don't worry about it. That's actually a really good sign because it means that you're taking on new information and that's good. But hi, dear Ernest. Yeah.
So it still is not about glazing, but what you were just talking about with the color also plays into something that I deal a lot with in perspective in a drawing. Perspective is a tool to encode three-dimensional information in a two-dimensional space. It has rules, and when done correctly, people understand it. And the same is true of the color temperatures that you were just speaking of. It's encoding. It's just giving a code of information, and it doesn't matter really. You could use bright orange and bright blue or subtle, but if you're consistent, people will understand that you have encoded three-dimensional information. And like I was saying about seeing your paintings, it's consistent within the world of this painting, and so it just feels right.
Yeah.
You can pull a piece out and say, oh, well, this white tablecloth in reality is pink. Okay, but it works within the overall color scheme of the painting. It's consistent. So
yeah.
So these are very, and again, this is not about glazing, but as you were saying, these are methods of encoding information for your viewer.
Yeah.
That was it.
It really is, yeah. Lisa, yeah.
So kind of with like what he was saying, but I think the color is all kind of related to that, because like when you're thinking about glazing, you can use it, of course, for unifying a painting and, you know, for the distance and pulling out some layers. But you're in your shadows and lights with the color temperature, you can correct that with the glaze. You can also adjust the shadow temperature, and even just small areas that may need adjustment. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And in fact, on occasion, I've taken a painting and I've put a conscious architecture temperatures of paint into the entire painting. So in other words, I've painted all the lights with, shall we say, a tiny, tiny tint of orange, and all the shadows with a tiny, thin blue glaze, the entire painting. So I've gone over the whole painting, giving it architecture like that, deliberately, when I found that it wasn't plausible in the way I needed it to be plausible. So yeah. And you know, that is just one of many, many functions, infinite functions really, of glazes, yeah. the thing about it really is to understand these truths, just these truths about how the world is built up, how light works, the physics of light, just a little bit, and understand all that, and then understand the philosophy of painting that we're going on to next, and just carry them. In other words, you don't have to understand things immediately, and you don't have to understand the potential of some information immediately. The thing to do is just carry it, is to just carry it with you, carry those ideas with you. So like listen to the recording and just kind of mull it over, make a list of them, a list of the things, and just carry them. And what will happen is you'll slowly absorb them. You'll simply absorb those truths. So, yeah, that's the way to do it kind of effortlessly. Next, let's go on to chords. Chords are families of color. They are families of color, and they've been considered in paintings probably for the last 1,000 years, maybe longer. The chords that make up a painting have been important for that long. They are just like musical chords in that they convey feelings. The chord of a painting, that particular chord, you know, the way a blues chord, which is like a minor seventh, conveys the blues, it conveys sadness. It's exactly the same in paintings. A particular chord, like Picasso's blue period, that particular palette conveyed sadness, and it happens to be blue, blue period. So chords convey feelings. They convey atmosphere, depending on the colors you choose to make a painting of. I mean, bear in mind, you can make it whatever you want, because it's not reality anyway. It never will be. Never was, never will be, never can be. They convey atmosphere. They convey tension or calm, brilliance or softness, elegance or lavishness, anything and everything. Chords, like musical chords, there are just about an infinite number of musical chords. They convey just a million different things, a million different feelings, don't they? And they're kind of irreplaceable. You know, Cole Porter often used to go into a complex and unexpected semitone. Every time we say goodbye, it has one of those. Unexpected and beautiful. Well, there are sort of these semitone chords in paintings as well, and same thing. It's an infinite vocabulary of chords to convey an infinite number of emotions, feelings, atmospheres, and so forth. Colors are infinite. The chords, I mean, if it was possible to be more than infinite, if the numbers of colors are vast, then the numbers of combinations of those colors that make up a chord are unthinkably vast. So yeah, chords are infinite as a vocabulary of feelings, atmosphere, tension or calm, brilliance or softness, elegance or lavishness, anything and everything. A chord includes tonal values and organization, because it isn't just what a color and tonal value are, but it's where they are in the painting. It's not just what they are, it's where you put them. And it's also how much of them you put. It is actually quantity and placement as well as color. Kind of an interesting idea. Yeah. I'm going to put that here in the notes that it is, so that, and you'll get these notes, you see, quantity and placement. It's also chroma, meaning brightness and dullness of a color. See if you've found a red that is perfect in the chord, it's perfect already. But you want to make a change and you want to make less of it. If you make less of that red, you have to make the red brighter to have the same impact with less square footage, as it were. If you expand that red area, to keep the chord the same, you've got to grey the red down to reduce its impact, because now there's more of it. See what I mean? It's really a balance of power. Yeah, Elizabeth, yeah.
This might be a stupid question, but
Yeah.
and I work on acrylics, which is different from oils, but how would you fix something that it had gone too dark? Is this something you can help with the glazes, or how you just have to go with, I don't know, overpaint? I'm not sure. It might be a stupid question.
You can actually, you raise a very interesting point, because it's much easier to glaze brilliance or to glaze darker. Glazing lighter can be a little bit tricky, and only because it puts like a mist effect, but it depends on the colors that you're glazing. So yeah.
But if you don't want that mist effect,
it's only some colors that cause the mist. Basically, the lighter a color,
yeah,
it's okay if you put, say, on a yellow, a lighter yellow, and you glaze it on. That's okay, that's fine. But if you put a lighter yellow and you want to glaze it onto a blue or a green, because it's lighter, it won't just have the effect of yellowing the blue or the green, it will also have the effect of putting a mist on it, like a yellow mist, which some artists, once again, a lot of artists use what would be considered to be failings by other artists to their advantage. So they like it. So the entire painting is filled with mists of different sorts, so it can be useful.
Yeah, I don't like them, and I don't know sometimes how to avoid them.
Yeah. It's an interesting question, because that is true. That is true. Light glazes are a little bit more tricky. Yeah. Yeah. So, so the chords are built, and they affect everything, basically. Yeah. So, chords are used in abstraction, realism, all genres of art, and even advertising, as Leah knows. In actual fact, advertising, we've talked about this before, advertising is actually very advanced in its understanding of color and its use of color. Very advanced, very slick, very powerful. They know the effect of color. It's really interesting. Yes. Art is a human abstraction. It is completely a system of laws, a system of traditions and laws and abstractions. Because a painting of a person is not a person, because of that, it is filled with that. It can be compared to speech, which is an abstract system of sounds providing representation and communication. When I say the word table, that's not a table. That sound represents a table to someone speaking that language. I make that sound with my mouth, table. And because you're familiar with the language, you hook it up with your idea of a table in your mind. It's compared to speech, an abstract system of sounds providing representation and communication. You now heard the object. You hardly heard the word because it went so fast into the idea of a table. Just like art, which is a system, an abstract system. Art is a human abstraction not found in nature. Art is not found in nature in its pure form. Abstraction means taken from, to abstract. You know the way in a book, an abstract is something taken out of a book. It is abstracted from it. Art is abstracted from nature, taken out of nature and used, but used for its own ends. Yeah, and orchestrated. All music is pure abstraction. Music is a very complex system of laws. It is pure abstraction, and in fact, this is nature. I mean, they are actually languages going on, but it's like a crowded room. It is just nature. It's just sounds happening. And the sounds of nature. Art only abstracts those things. We can present the idea of thunder, but really, all music and art is an abstraction. For example, prediction show, extended low, you're feeling just the same. But seasons come and seasons go. I'll make you smile again. If you don't believe me, take me by the hand. Can't you feel you're warming up? Yeah, I'm your weatherman. It's completely an abstract system based on Pythagoras. Every note you heard was a Pythagorean note. They're all founded on those hammers from the blacksmith shop. It's completely an abstract system, and it's beautiful. You know, it's all completely beautiful. wonderful thing about this is that your paintings are completely abstractions. And the tools are vast, color. And these laws of light are absolutely vast. And the concepts you can come up with, the styles and genres and concepts, if it were possible, are even more vast. It's incredible. This is astonishing. It's astonishing stuff. You're working in a tradition. You are working in a tradition here, and the tradition is built with laws, just like music. But within the laws, just like Weatherman and Debussy here, Clair de Lune, the possibilities are infinite. They're as far apart as Weatherman and Clair de Lune. Whatever you can imagine, you can pretty much do. If you got a 40 by 40 foot mural to paint, no problem. Just work it out. Follow the laws, build a chord, and so forth. So, yeah. So, because you're making a specific chord of color, that conveys a desired atmosphere and personality. Have you heard music and seen movies where you got the impression that the composer or the director didn't quite know what they wanted? They'd not quite made their mind up. In other words, all the choices are there, all the possibilities are there, but they really hadn't figured out what they wanted. So any artwork that you make, see, it's all there for you. Atmosphere and personality, it's just about infinite. What do you want? What do you want? What do you need to express what it is you are putting out there? Because it's all there. It is all there. Like Paul McCartney and John Lennon. Blackbird and She Loves You, they weren't there before that. The laws were there. They tuned their guitars, they obeyed the laws, and they put them together. They just invented them. The question is, what do you want? What do you want? What's in your mind? What do you really, really want? Because you've got all the laws here. It's all right there for you. So yeah. Atmosphere and personality bring their own tonal construction, cast and temperature. And if the forms are required to be apparently three-dimensional, they bring their own color, temperature, architecture. It all starts from the concept you have and the atmosphere and personality that you want it to have. It all starts there, really, doesn't it? The relationships between the areas and colors are so critical and independent that it cannot be done without glazes. The relationships between the areas of tonal value and color. That is the making of a painting, those relationships. When I say that, there's no difference between the background and the foreground. As people in Japan and China know very well, people see the whole painting equally. It's all equal, perfectly equal. They see not the girl but the girl in the street. Not the wedding ring, but the jeweler's window, the entire window. They see not the car, but the highway, the car, and the mountains in the distance. They see the whole package. The fact that we see only the car is a belief. It's a personal priority. But in art, you kind of have to realize that people of other beliefs will be looking at your paintings. All it takes is someone Asian to look at your painting and they'll see the background. Because of their belief system, their cultural belief system, they will equally see the background. Kind of interesting, isn't it? They see the object as equal to its setting. Yeah. Are you ready for the slides? You're probably a little bit kind of, but are you okay? Does anyone have any, I sounded like a valley girl then. What is that? Are you okay? Does anyone have a question or anything that's on your mind? Or are you all right? Actually, seeing the slides will answer a lot. What I'm going to do with these slides is I might say a couple of words about them, but I actually would really like it if you could all put your sound on when you're ready or when you want to say something. But I'd like you to tell me, the trouble is you won't necessarily see each other. So you might be interrupting each other a little bit. That doesn't matter too much, but tell me what you think about the atmosphere and personality of color chords in these paintings. The atmosphere and personality of these paintings, because they've all been deliberately chosen. So I'll see if I can go to it right now. Yeah. And it's that. Here it goes. I actually don't see all of you, unfortunately. I wish I could. But was it Val that mentioned this, the unifying glaze? Oh no, Lisa maybe. Anyway, I don't remember. But this is a very poor image, unfortunately, of a Christian Vincent painting that we saw in a show down in Chelsea a very long time ago. So there it is. So let's put a red glaze on it just to see what happens, you know. So a unifying glaze, basically. So if you do that, that's sort of what you get. It changes everything. See what it does. See what a red glaze does to the green. It turns the green into a kind of brown gray. Amps up the red, of course, and turns the yellow into orange, orangey yellow. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. By the way, does anyone have any comments about his color chord? That is a chord. Quantities of color and quantities of value. Yeah, Lisa, yeah.
Yes, I really like it. I love the color chord and I love the use of color in that painting. I mean, it's you know, I mean, it's not something you would probably think about that combination with the way it's presented, but it really works for me. I like it.
Yeah, it's very, very decisive, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I loved it when I first saw it. I don't like it anymore. You know, we change. This was a painting in the Museum of Wales. Just kind of wondered what a yellow glaze would do to it. And it does that. and it unifies it, pulls it all together. And you probably would not choose a yellow glaze on that painting. But anyone, any comment about this? You don't have to comment, about every painting, but it's just a thought. That is a color chord, very deliberate. You notice that it's been painted on a beige background, much like my canvases. Yeah. This was one of my students' paintings, and this was really more about the strength of a glaze. What a glaze does in terms of strength. Because if you only put a little bit of the glaze on, it just does that. It's just a little bit of a blue glaze. It turns it into a slight twilight, and ever more like dusk. Of course, if we'd have left the moon bright, it would have made more sense. But basically, the deeper the glaze, the more it affects it. Yeah. This is one of the students in Texas, Gina, and just interesting to see what a complex glaze, a very complex mixed color, like an atmosphere color would do. It just, it just puts air into the painting, doesn't it? You see the way the painting looks a little raw? It looks a little bit kind of amateurish, kind of. The minute you put an atmosphere glaze on, you see how suddenly it's like an artist that now knows quite a lot more than the previous one. You see that? Isn't that strange? Look, there it is raw, and here it is with air. It's just like the horses can breathe now. But there you believe them to be made of paint there. But here you believe they can breathe. Isn't that interesting? And there it is getting stronger. Now they're in a snowstorm. So yeah. Over time, you learn to predict the results and the purpose of a glaze, so you get more and more intentional as time goes by. So here's another Christian Vincent painting, and this is just kind of interesting for you because this is a multiple glaze, just done very, very roughly in PowerPoint. So imagine a blue glaze on this, for argument's sake. So let's stick a blue glaze over the whole thing. Actually, I kind of like it a little better. But then if we go ahead and take it off the main figure, we wind up with that, which is now quite an interesting relationship between the background figure and the foreground figure, isn't it? So blue glaze over the whole thing, now take it off the foreground figure, and suddenly you have an interesting relationship. A little bit Beltus-like in a way. Now this is quite interesting. So here's a Picasso that really no one should ever mess with because it's just perfect the way it is. Anyway, I messed with it. So here's a kind of crimson violet glaze over the whole darn thing. Picasso would literally shoot me with his pistol. And I then took it off the left figure. And then I put a warm glaze on the right figure and then a dark glaze on the background. Now the right figure, which is in fact a mirror, is in a way like a mirror now. And you can kind of see that interesting relationship. Nonetheless, how do you respond to what Picasso really intended? Do you have any thoughts about it? It is rather great, I think. It's very jangling, isn't it? Very jangling. It's aggressive like Picasso was, you know. This one, I don't know who painted this. I feel I should know. I decided to put a secondary glaze over it, like just kind of grey over the whole thing. But then what I did was I decided to remove it from the background. So I first put it on and then I took it off the blue background. Took it off, and then I darkened the background. So now it's rather dramatically different from that. It's now that, which personally I think has more atmosphere. That's my feeling about it. I'm only demonstrating a few things at the moment. We'll get off these. Now this is Irma, who liked painting cups. And she brought that to me, and I just in PowerPoint, I put a darker glaze, a brown glaze on the background, which I felt improved it. So you see the way the cup now is more understandable. That's it before, which to me is rather, I was going to say gross, but that's Irma's second name is gross. But there it is. I think it needed it, don't you think? It needed to have the background tempered down a bit. But maybe not, matter of choice. And here, of course, is Andrew Wyeth, and I'll get on to asking you again about paintings in just a minute. I'm only using these as an example, but look how subtle Andrew Wyeth is, very subtle. I decided to throw in more shadows, lower left and middle right, to direct us inside more strongly. So I imposed my own will on the painting. So I put shadows there. And now the sunshine is directing us to the interior. It's quite a difference, isn't it? So yeah. This one, Chagall, I was simply messing around with them, really. I decided to warm the lower half to create a complementary link to the blues of the top half, whilst drawing attention to the figure on the bottom. There's a little figure at the bottom, you see. So I just stuck that over it. Here it is without it, and here it is with it. Same thing with Hopper. I just pushed the buildings back in the background. And I used a color from the penumbra of the tunnel. And it pushes the background back, gives it distance. Okay, so here we are, onto the paintings. Does anyone have any reaction to the atmosphere and personality of this? It's a color chord. I really should have shown them to you upside down. I intended to, and then I didn't do it. How do you feel about that chord? I actually feel that it's very refined and a little bit twee. You notice that the red of the lips and the red of the flowers on the couch is like the finest decoration on a teacup. It's quite twee. And it doesn't make me feel good. It kind of worries me. It's elegant, and you notice, of course, that she is displaying, meanwhile the children are behind the couch at arm's length. Personally, to me, it feels a little creepy. The chord and what the chord does is a little creepy. So I pushed them back. I made it definitely about her. You can do whatever you want, These are paintings that consume detail in the shadows in order to simplify a composition. And actually, Sharon was facing this question about complex compositions, and I was talking about using shadow and light to completely simplify what is really a complicated composition, and all these artists do it. So look at de Ribera. You see the way he's consumed a lot of information in the middle bottom there. He's just eaten it up into shadow to get rid of it because it wasn't contributing. That was almost certainly done with glazes. Look at how Vermeer has consumed tons of information so as not to overcomplicate. Where that cabinet meets the wall is gone. The side of his robe is gone. The chair is a silhouette. The fabric on the bottom of the table hanging down is very, very muted. You do know that he used up to 30 glazes on an area the size of a fingertip. On each little cup of paint, he would use up to 30 glazes, Vermeer. It's really amazing, amazing thing. And Dick Kett, look at the way the shadows consume information, simplifying and clarifying the composition. Same with Sargent, of course. Unbelievably crisp and clear. What are your reactions to this, to the personality and the kind of emotional effect and the atmosphere of it? How does it make you feel?
I think with that one, it's almost like the figure in the foreground has more strength because it is so clear and so sharp. And typically your images in the background don't speak out as much. And so since it's kind of, dissipating in the back,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know, kind of like, it's almost dark, like he's looming over the figure in the front.
Mm. And the overall chord is brilliantly crisp, isn't it? I don't know whether it actually is white or whether it actually is black, but they are so far apart that it is just stunning, isn't it? It is really demanding. Very extreme, isn't it? But do you remember the canoe law, of course? He has used the canoe law perfectly in this painting because he wanted to greatly expand the tonal values. And in order to do that, he had to narrow the use of color until it was almost non-existent. Do you see what I mean about that? Perfect example of the canoe.
He kind of did that a lot with his paintings, I believe.
He did, didn't he? Yeah, a lot. Egon Schiele. What a beaten up kind of chord. It's just really basic. It's like a mine worker. It's like a laborer. It's just a ferocious chord, I think. But very simple, actually, because it's basically red and green. Red, green, and the greys and whites, blacks, greys, white, black. And just that peach. Red, green, and peach. Yeah. Very, very amazingly simple. You could probably count on one hand the number of colors used to make the painting. Here's the thing about it that's just worth considering is when you plan to make a painting, Can you imagine planning to use, say, 4 colors or 5 colors and say, no, that is exactly what is needed, no more than that. That is it. You know, this is famous for it, very famous for its brutality, its simple brutality. Really extraordinary. Cézanne also, same thing, consuming shadow. In actual fact, I learned from Cézanne and Manet the concept of consuming shadow, which is what I do with the jackets of my figures in my paintings now. I use a single color to suggest detail and information that is actually not there. I got it from Cézanne and Manet, yeah. Once again, a little like Cézanne, a very wide tonal range and a very narrow range of color. And again, it is red-green. Tiny touch of blue in the middle, but red-green. They are obeying the canoe perfectly. Group of 7. Consuming information in the foreground to an extent, tonally, lowering the foreground. I'm interested to know how you respond to this chord. I think it's actually quite a perfect chord, but are there any comments about it? Atmosphere and personality. So exciting and vibrant, isn't it? Kind of astonishing, really. Up to 30 glazes on each small spot. There once again is detail being consumed into shadows. In other words, you can have a third or a half of 3/4 of your painting completely lost in shadow if you want. But information is suggested as being in those shadows that isn't necessarily there, if that's what you want. Consuming the distance in light and mist. David Woodford, quite a good friend of mine. Look at the light glaze in the background. Almost certainly glazes. He was an extraordinary man. He lived on a bicycle. He spent his life pretty much on a bicycle with his paints. And that, same thing, information consumed in the foreground. So here are the ones where I'd really love any comments that you have, any reactions to the chords, I'd really love. Jean Sparrow Jones. Any thoughts or feelings about that? To me, it is so calm and not exactly sedate. It's relaxed and so calm, and it's the chord of colors that does that. Such a restful chord.
To me, it almost feels like, even though it's kind of a, like you said, it kind of has that feel of being calm and peaceful, but at the same time, the color in the center is almost, like a little bit of chaos there. So I don't know, it feels like there's a little of both in it.
Yeah, good point, really. It is chaos in the center. It's almost an abstract, really, in the center, isn't it?
I also find myself, because
The bed has turned into an abstract. Was that Eva talking?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can, Eva. Sorry, never heard you properly.
It's okay. I also find myself, because the walls and all the surroundings are so muted, my eye starts at that pink circle at the foot of the bed and kind of carries around to the lamp and this other thing over here. There's little bits of pink all around the edges, so I find that I'm almost connecting the dots of pink items.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a surprisingly, the more time you spend with it, it's a surprisingly complex chord, really, isn't it? And a complex idea. The more time you spend with it.
You think of
It
cold.
seems like the less color that you have, the more somber the painting is. And then when they start to bring color into it, it brings a little more life to it. So, you know, I see the amount of color that you bring in versus the, the lack of it in areas kind of plays off of each other.
Yeah. A lot of it is very muted. So it's like it's really using very carefully, very artfully using a limited tonal range and a limited color range to do a lot. It does a lot with a little, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Kind of.
By the black on that jar, I'm really bothered by that. I can't just, it's just my eye go there.
Yeah. That is very,
Especially because it's black and white contrast.
it really is, yeah.
It bugs me, but
It is quite extreme, isn't it? I think it may have been put there only because of the block of dark on the bottom left corner. It
yeah,
needed to go there because otherwise the painting was falling over, probably.
yeah. But it might be not the right black. The right, I don't know.
Maybe not. No, maybe not.
So then I would have some thoughts if it fits in.
Yeah,
So overall, it's a very difficult composition. There's nothing in this composition that invites you into the space. The foreground is off-putting. Usually that becomes a framing element, like in Vermeer, to lead you into the space. But where can you go? You can't really go to the bed because it's a mess. The two brightest things, the reflection on the water pitcher and the fabric in the basket, both direct you to the windows. They both take you out of the space. And yet you can't get to the windows because it's cut off on the left and there's a lamp in front of the window further back. It just isn't inviting you in. The focal point really perhaps is the headboard of the bed, which doesn't have a lot of detail. There's really nothing there to hold you. So now there may be an area to come into the composition on the lower right, but that's where on the video my little monitor picture of whoever's talking is. So that might change it a tiny bit, but
yeah.
there's the colors are muted. They're not particularly welcoming. The colors on the bed are very cool. So there's not the sense of warm light coming in the window. The light that's coming in the window feels very cool.
Yeah.
The pictures are off-putting. You can't really see what they are. There's no connection. They don't seem to be, which is to say the paintings visible on the wall, they don't seem to be paintings of people, which would be humanizing. So there's something off-putting about the palette, the cast, and the composition to me.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that to me is, and I should have showed them upside down really to take away the subject and perspective, more or less, because we're thinking about the color chord. But the interesting thing is, I think it might be quite artful because for one thing, the painter doesn't always want you to enter. See, the painter can have one of a million different motives. Some want to hold you out. Some don't want you seeing what's on the paintings. And the truth is, when you walk into a room like this, depending on what's going on, you're often only very dimly aware of what is in those paintings. Just very dimly aware. They're really only a suggestion. And quite often, one of the problems they have in courtrooms with witnesses is their memory is astonishingly little. They disagree enormously because what they saw was their beliefs about what those things were. They see what they expect, basically. Interesting, isn't it?
Feels very English to me, or Welsh, sort of Welsh holiday cottage or something.
It does, doesn't it? It does look very, very sort of English, yeah. Could be French, I guess, but it does look kind of English. Maybe Welsh, yeah. So there's Sargent again. What does the chord do to you? The chord of colours and tonal values. It's got Sargent's usual very wide tonal range and narrow colour range.
Feels very spacious.
Yeah, it's very spacious, even though it's a massive block of somewhere between black and dark red-brown. It's a massive block of that, but it suggests vast space and very ornate, beautiful, ornate, elegant space, doesn't it? It suggests that. We just kind of believe it. But you know the way, with a good police interviewer, you know the way that, yes, they're listening to what the witness is saying, or the suspect is saying, but they're getting a hunch about what the truth really is about them. Now, while the information in the painting, the candelabra, the people in very lovely clothing, while that gives you the information, that's what the painting is saying, but the chord is delivering an emotional reference as well. See, you always have to ask yourself, what is the chord of colour and the orchestration of the painting? What is that giving you emotionally? What is that bringing to you that the information is not necessarily telling you?
Maybe about memory.
Maybe, yeah. And that only a small amount of what is shown, only a small amount of what is there is revealed in this painting. The vast majority of it is actually not revealed. It is rather politely restrained and held from you, as if there are vastnesses there that are not being shown. Yeah.
Well,
By
this
contrast, sorry, yeah.
So this one differs from the previous in the same compositional way that I was speaking. The Sargent one, the figures so the figures on the lower right, the woman is aware of you. She seems fine with the fact that you're there. She's looking at you. The other figures aren't looking at you, but they seem inviting enough. There's room in the composition to walk into the space. You can see the path and you won't be surprising anyone. So you don't feel like, you're unwelcome. There is more to discover. There's, as dark as the background is, there's the subtle hints of sparkle. There's something back there that's interesting. The foreground defines the level of opulence of the space, so you assume it will continue. So there's more interesting things to find back there. So the darkness doesn't really act to diminish what is to be seen in the space. It's just some delightful things yet to discover is the way that I'm reading this.
And Ernest, let me ask you.
Yes.
what does the kind of rust salmon color that you see all through the painting, little fragments of rust salmon, rust orange kind of, and its relationship, you see on the left side, the color of the picture frame is like a kind of gray green, very washed out, yellow green gray. What does that relationship say to you emotionally?
Oh, that's a harder one for me to address.
Purely emotionally.
Yeah, I find the yellows really interesting between warm and cool, and I'm still struggling to figure out why. So the yellows are going a little bit cool, which seems to pull away a little bit. So to me, the feeling is that the opulence isn't necessarily for me. It's a little less inviting. Yes, I can come into the space and I can discover things, but the coolness of the yellows, which is contrasted then with the warm brown tone, it sort of helps to show that the yellow is a little bit cooled. I may be reading way more into that than was intended, but that's the answer to your question from my perspective, is that it pulls back the invitation, the connection. Perhaps I just personally respond more to warm colors than cool, but that's my personal feeling.
Mm.
Edward,
Yes, yes.
I feel like with the pink, like the colors, I like that green, gray, and the kind of almost salmon-like colors and stuff like that. I don't know, the colors seem to be very peaceful, very calm. It kind of invites you into space. You, in the clarity of the figures, especially like in the foreground, I don't know, it just feels very inviting, like you just want to be in that space. I don't know, that's just me.
Yeah. I have the opposite. I don't care for the space at all. I just first of all, I don't see the figure looking at me as inviting me. I feel like there is a barrier. She's inside herself, even though her eyes are looking at me. Yes, you can enter through there, but there is nothing. She is like in her own world, and I don't agree with the inviting space or the colors of it. To me, it's all about the world of the characters, and there could be nothing there. Although that the candelabra is a little bit too in my face, but I don't react to this.
Be interesting to see an abstract made of those exact colours in those proportions. Yeah. I'll just shift. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, no, I just feel like it's this stately elegance to it. And I really like the gold where the man's sitting in the back, and
yes,
with that silver in front of it, in front of his leg. I kind of really like that combination.
It's very sedate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very sedate.
I feel like the old lady's has some regret actually now. Jesus.
Yes.
And she could almost have come out of that big painting on the wall.
The Grand Dame, yeah. Very interesting. The greys are very important actually in the painting, aren't they? Very important colour. So Gwen John, look at the tonal values. How do you feel about that? Not how do you feel about the subject matter, but how do colours that subtle make you feel?
Personally, I love this. I love this. It is just so moody and atmospheric, and I love it. I could look at it for a very long time.
Yeah. it's incredibly tender, isn't it? And
Mhm.
tender and
Very
calm.
introspective
Yes, yes.
and a little sad.
It is wonderful. The foreground, the figure with her cat are unified. The tones unify, and the background is rough. It's not challenging and threatening, but she provides some calm. And it seems that having the cat there is helping her with that calm. And she's looking out of the painting. She's looking away from the tones behind, which are a bit chaotic. So
Yes.
there feels a good balance between chaos and order, even within this limited range of tone.
Yeah, it's actually a very sophisticated painting. And the thing is, you know, the song Yesterday by the Beatles, the words used to be ham and eggs. Not yesterday, but ham and eggs. It started being ham and eggs yesterday. And then later they wrote the other words. But the most important thing about the song was the melody. And the melody is pure abstract. And you begin to be able to orchestrate paintings when you can not see the subject, but see the melody, see the abstraction. When you can start to see what they actually are rather than what they mean, and interpret what they physically are as an organization of color, you begin to be able to orchestrate paintings. Because look how extreme this one is. It's very extreme, actually. Its choices are very extreme. And actually, Gwen John is, for some time, regarded as a much more important painter than Augustus John. Augustus John being much like John Singer Sargent, really. Yeah. That's funny. My, I don't know why, but my, oh, there we are. Maybe this works. There we are. Philip Pearlstein. How about that for an interesting way of separating the figures out? But what a chord, what an interesting chord. Is it possible for you, just experiment with this, try to not see the subject. Try to see the organization of color as a thing in its own right. Because, you know, when someone buys one of your paintings, when they first choose it, they might choose it on what they think it means and this and that. They're not really doing that. They are to an extent, but they're also choosing the colors and the organization of the painting. And later, when they pass it in the hall, every time they pass it in the hall, they won't think, oh, there's the guy looking a bit moody and the girl leaning on him and maybe he wants to be left alone, or you know, whatever they're interpreting it as. They won't think that any longer. What they increasingly live with is not a realistic painting, but an abstract. Whatever your paintings are of, later they start to live with an abstract made of those colors.
I have a hard time separating because they are very important in that, to me, in that painting. For like, if I see the colors alone, I think they're bad. To me, that is a bad color chord. But if I see them in together with the, I just think that lighting on those characters is great. So I have a hard time separating. I think that because it's terrible. I think it's great, but the colors per se, I
Yeah.
don't like. But to me, it's difficult to separate.
Actually, it is a very awkward color chord, I think. I don't understand it as a chord of color. But we are going to get on to people that, we're going to get on to some people that really understand color. I don't know who this is, but I thought it was interesting as an organization of color. But we're getting on to some people, this is Andrei Remnev, that this struck me as interesting simply as a very unique organization of color, and almost mannerist in its posture and everything, for what it's worth. And that's gold in the background, isn't it? Looks like it anyway. Maybe not, but it looks like gold to me, gold leaf.
Yeah.
Maria Kirikov. I'm in communication with her almost every day. Very, very extreme, isn't it? Tonally, color-wise, very extreme.
Is that an oil?
I believe she does paint in oil, yeah. Yeah.
Because speaking of glazes, especially in the background with the spotlights, it looks very much like watercolor washes.
Oh, it does actually, yeah. You may be right. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Or it may be
Could be
gouache.
glazing.
Could be gouache or something, yeah. Now this guy, Marion Ginsberg, I've known him for many years, and I regard him as one of the finest living colorists. I think that he doesn't know how to paint a painting that isn't perfect in its organization of color and tonal value. I think they are all perfect. How do you respond to the, not the subject matter, but the color? Do you like the color chord? Or do you respond to it in some
I
way?
think it's beautiful.
It is astonishing, isn't it?
Mhm.
Really
I love the
astonishing.
colors.
Yeah.
I agree. I do like it very much.
If you pass across it with an eyedropper in Photoshop, you know, Photoshop, that facility that brings up the Pantone number, by passing across an image, you'll find that when you go to an area that looks like it's one color, you find that it's not one color at all. It's a multitude of colors. He may use glazing, but I think he uses a vast amount of scumbling and overpainting. Scumbling, grazing colors on, one onto the other. Yeah. And working wet in wet as well.
Feels like he just works intuitively. I mean that blue green shirt in the middle like is important, but it feels like he's more intuitive, you know, with this color.
I think you're right. I think he is someone with just an incredible eye. He just understands color. Look at the face of the left figure. Look how incredibly muted that is.
Mm. It's also amazing. Sorry.
Yeah.
How it's amazing how he can use the color combinations of the ferns and branches at the top, and yet they are background. I mean, how can you put lime green and orange and lime green and purple and have it recede into the background? It's quite masterful.
I know, it's astonishing. Yeah. Yes. Do you know?
Well,
You wouldn't believe it. Yeah.
There's a system in place where the foreground has dark line work and the background has inverted light line work. So yet again, there's a bit of a system. Even if it seems arbitrary, if it's consistent, it makes sense.
Yeah, there are always systems going on, aren't there? Always. Yeah. And look at this. This guy cannot make a mistake. He doesn't know how to make a mistake. Absolutely.
I find it kind of interesting because normally anything for me that goes over like in a quadratic or outside that has like kind of pulling from all sides of the color wheel in one, it's like it's usually so discordant or garish to me, but I like how it's like the values, the tonal structure, the matrix underneath that's really controlling how that's working, and how we kind of shift from like the different kind of saturation like chroma in areas, but they're all like balanced and they're harmonized enough that it kind of leads you around. But I don't know, I always find these ones really difficult with like the amount of color that goes into pieces. I know I'm normally like put off by most of them, so I kind of lean more to like chromatic neutrals and stuff. So I think it's masterful how everything's layered in there. So yeah.
And I've a good mind to either give you the website or send you all the images I have of his work. You know, I have about 30 images of his work. And it's unbelievable. He never makes a mistake. It's just, I agree with you, Eva. I mean, it's normally people that attempt to do what he has done normally fall flat on their faces and make a complete mess. But this guy, this is what I mean by color chords. Oh boy. And this is Rachel Jones. Now, I think actually this is an example of doing something similar to Marion Ginsburg, but not doing it very well. It sort of almost works. But the thing you get with Marion Ginsburg is you get conviction, don't you? You get this incredible wash of conviction goes over you. You say, oh my God, yeah, it works. But this one, don't you find you are struggling to validate it? You're looking around, you're struggling to say, hang on, well, yeah, maybe, I'm not sure, you know, you're doing all that nonsense. Marion Ginsburg, look at it.
I'm not struggling, it's totally a no for me.
Yeah, this one is a bit hard to look at.
It is hard to look at, yeah. This is my old friend, Alan Feltus.
Love this.
Yeah.
It's got such a soft mood to it, and the facial expressions are peaceful. They both seem very much in their own worlds, and how homogenous all the colors are makes me feel like I'm also completely in the world that they're in.
Yeah. He lives in Assisi in Italy. He's the sweetest man. He's a New York Jew, actually, and he's just the loveliest man. And this is kind of the world that he lives in. He only ever really paints himself. They're all versions of himself, except he's got a massive moustache that never goes in. But yeah, he takes forever to make a painting. And he works in a tiny, tiny little studio with a pot-belly stove in those cold, snowy Italian winters in Umbria.
Well, that painting's just absolutely spectacular. I love it.
It is astonishing, isn't it? Sorry. Really astonishing.
The chroma range is very narrow. There's not a paint there that's more than about 25 or at the most 30% saturation.
Yeah.
And also the light dark, the tonal range is also very limited, but within that there's tremendous distance. The face the reclining figure pushes back against the bright shoulder, but then the other shoulder of the foreground figure is contrasted against the lighter flesh tone behind. And so the darkest being the hair of the foreground figure, you're drawn right there. But the hair of the reclining figure doesn't distract you because it's against a similar value tone. Color differentiation, but tonally they're very similar. It is just a masterful piece of leading you through what's presented within a very narrow range.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah, they're really masterful. Actually, if you turn it upside down, which I should have done, the book on the bottom left, if this was an abstract painting, look at the way the book on the bottom left is basically a pale cream square in the painting lined with red, is what it really is, because it's almost horizontal and vertical in its shape and almost square, and it just sits in the composition, much like the cushion between the two heads, another square. It is just beautiful. Now, interestingly, he uses really Caravaggio's color chord. The green and red, this is basically a green and red color chord. Caravaggio only used green and red. Green, red, and earth tones, and that was it. There's a touch of blue there, but actually that is extremely unusual for Caravaggio. Practically every painting is the same color chord, but that was where color was at. But from there on, it is Baroque theatre. It is theatre, dramatics. Of course, Maurice Denis, perfect. Again, perfect. Nearly done, guys, nearly done. Sorry to keep you so long. I think that this person, Keita Morimoto, is really great. And look at the way you can make the underlying color of a painting anything you want. The underlying color of all this guy's paintings are green and turquoise. And they're wonderful. They're just wonderful. Don't you think? I think they're absolutely brilliant. Beautiful chord of color. He never deviates. I never deviate from my current underlying palette, actually. But his are better than mine. His sense of color is exquisite. I love it. And I think that's it. Yeah. There we are. Well, you guys, there it is. So you kind of need glazing because every painting will be an experiment in putting together, in orchestrating an idea. Thing is, what you have to your advantage is it can be anything. It can be literally anything. Don't constrain yourself. You can make it an atmosphere and a personality that serves your purposes. So have it really, really serve your purposes. You can do anything. I'd take a painting that never really worked and put, a turquoise green glaze over the entire thing, and then get a piece of rag and start pulling things off. It'll have a new life. It just start again. It'll be a completely new concept of a painting, Just a thought, but we're not painting human beings or architecture. We are really making orchestrations. Yeah, really, that is what they are. Pleasing orchestrations. Yeah. Well, you guys, that was a lot of information. Sorry it was so much. Should we go for the last Saturday of the month next month? The same again, last Saturday of the month? Yeah. So it's a month away from now. You know, you kind of need it to be a month away. So I'll come out to you with the recording, the lecture notes, and the PowerPoint file, so you have everything. And with my a copy of my swatches there, so that you've got everything I referred to. Yes.